Salutators, my potats, am's your Rave, back again with another Read with Rave video. A couple of disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, to avoid copyright infringement, I have already gotten permission from the authors of these stories, as the authors are either myself or my friends, and depending on what story I am reading, I will have a link to the social medias in the description. Disclaimer number two, Read with Rave is not meant for children, as the target audience is young adults and teens. So if you are a smaller child, please jump off this video and go watch my gaming or speed paint videos.
Today, I will be reading The Crossroads Planet, Book 1 of the Crossroads series by Robert Field.
Chapter 19. Crystal sat quietly eating some trail provisions that someone had handed her and tried to make some sense of the preceding minutes. The group of scouts had secured the prisoners, and other groups of scouts had appeared to assist. The prisoners were removed and taken further into defend territory. Lance sat at her side with an arm around her, protectively and also proudly. She didn't feel proud, though, only slightly sick, and not in a way that food or energy could remedy. The now enlarged group of defenders tended to their own wounded, which were few and not seriously hurt. Lace sat next to Bruce, with shock just beginning to register on her face. Lance, as a healer, was emanating some negative emotions, mostly centered around the idea of fighting being contrary to the concept of healing. Crystal roused herself from her own emotions and consulted with one in charge of the group of scouts. She nodded sympathetically at Crystal's desires to be back at school, but shook her head at the idea of them proceeding towards the capital, even though the immediate area was now secure. This was only a detachment, not even a platoon. Beyond these hills, maybe more, although... She broke off and favored Crystal with a curious gaze. "Well, you did seem to give a good accounting of yourself during the skirmish. The other guys really did come off second best." "I was trying to disable rather than to kill, mostly. I had trouble guessing the effects of various power levels. My initial attacks killed more than I meant to. Then I got the hang of it, and the rest I wounded for the most part." "You needn't apologize, dear. This is your first combat experience, isn't it?" "I expect so. Likely most of what you've studied is healing. Well, it's all different in combat. Some like it, some don't. Some get good, some don't. I worry about those that like it and get good. I'd much rather see someone that doesn't really like it but is dedicated enough to get good, and can at least stomach the work. You, dear, handled yourself most coolly. My thanks to you for keeping the death toll as low as it was. Perhaps I could spare a group of scouts to see you further along the way, perhaps to the first town where the caravans are running." Crystal smiled and nodded, slightly at a loss for the good fortune that her handiwork had brought, and unsure if she should accept the spoils of war, as it were. She stammered a brief acceptance and thanks, and returned to her companions. 3 scouts joined them, and they proceeded a little ways to a sheltered hiding spot, then rested there until dark. After it was fully dark, they went forth, paralleling the high road, but staying clear of it, moving silently and low to the ground. Crystal and the others had trouble skulking along to the satisfaction of the scouts. They were making too much noise and leaving an obvious trail. Crystal responded by invoking a levitation spell. The 4 companions crouched low on it, and Crystal sent it floating along an inch or two clear of the ground, silently and without disturbing the ground beneath them. 2 scouts went ahead to make sure the way was clear, and 1 guarded the back trail. When the night grew chilly, Crystal allowed the grid to heat up and take the edge off the coolness of the air. The others dozed in turns, with 1 awake to give Crystal some company. With the first hint of false dawn, the scouts found another hiding spot, and there they spent the day. The scouts took turns to watch for intruders. As they were preparing to set out for the evening, an idea occurred to Crystal. During the day, a front had blown in from the south, bringing a lowering layer of clouds above them. Crystal suggested that they all sit on a levitation grid that she would summon, and then elevate it until it was above the clouds. Then she would be able to send it quickly along eastward toward the capital. With her spirit sight, she would not have any trouble visualizing the terrain. The scouts indicated that in that case they would part company now, and in any case they were within a day's walk of a nearby town where caravans were reported to be operating. Lance sided with Crystal on general principles. Lace and Bruce consulted with each other, then agreed. So Crystal summoned another levitation grid and arranged it in the shape of a deep, round bowl. Lance smiled as he saw the grid take shape, using the spirit sight that he had been trying very hard to become proficient with. He remembered the last time Crystal had summoned such a bowl, and the activities that had taken place therein. Crystal made it a bit larger, then dropped one side down for them to enter. The foursome settled in with their baggage, cozily close and comfortable. The grid was warming up, and soon they were able to shed their cloaks and still cuddle together. They were rising slowly up, and soon they were entirely shrouded in the clouds. For a long time they could only see the mists surrounding them. Finally, they emerged above the clouds into a brilliantly starry night sky. Crystal used her inertial tracker to point the way back to the capital city. The magic bowl started eastward and soon was skimming quickly over the countertops. The tracker indicated an appreciable speed that they were traveling at and calculated the time required to reach the city. Dawn should see them close to the outskirts. Crystal had Lance and Lace both monitor her condition to make sure that she could maintain the spell and did not get too hungry. Crystal was prepared to bring them back to the ground should it appear that she would be unable to keep them airborne. Crystal used her spirit sight to sense the presence of life on the ground below, and brought the bowl to a halt well outside the populated areas of the city. She caused the bowl to descend through a cloud layer, which was much thinner now, and much further off the ground. They broke through the ceiling, and she directed it to an uninhabited area of small hills and ravines to the south of the city. They came to rest finally in a small grassy gully, and rested there, awaiting the dawn. Lace insisted on giving attention to Crystal, helping her to relax from an all-night flight, and dealing with some of the emotions derived from the combat experience. Crystal relaxed and was soon asleep. Several hours later, the sun well up, they collected themselves and proceeded on foot out of the hills. Midday found them on the high road that led northward into the city, and soon they came to a staging post where they could wait for the next caravan, which was to come by within the hour. Several days later they arrived in Crossroads, quietly and by night. They decided not to go into the college until daytime, and went instead into the grove by the river that Lance seemed to have a fondness for. Crystal summoned a warming spell, and they sat cozily together. Not especially tired, they cuddled and conserved well into the night. "How well we all seem to work together," Lace exclaimed. "Two heart-bonded couples, four good friends. Such a nice symmetry." "Quite," said Crystal. "I do the magics required a lot of energy and not much precision. Lance heals physically injured with my help. Lace heals emotionally injured, and I can replenish her energy afterward. Bruce, what do you do, Bruce?" Bruce looked sheepish. I I can share thoughts with animals. Somewhat. I've tried to develop other skills, even related skills. I suppose that I'll become a veterinary assistant someday." "That's fascinating," said Crystal. "So, can you help the disturbed animals to calm down?" "Yes, I can, Chris. I used it a little bit while we were skulking along by night to keep animals from getting upset by our approach and giving the alarm to anyone who might have been alerted to our presence." Lace looked at Bruce with a dreamy expression on her face and all but melted into him. Their eyes closed. Some moments later they opened them again. "Sorry, Lance, Crystal. Popped off into our dream world. Wish you could see our private little cove. The sun is always just setting above the water, and the sand and air are perfectly warm. A little ways from the beach there's some grass and then some trees. It's a narrow little cove, with high rocky hills on either side." Crystal looked thoughtful. "I wish we could show you our private little mountain glen. The sun always shines down out of a clear blue sky. Around it there's rocky hillsides and little paths through the trees. Haven't explored beyond the grassy lawn. You're right, Lace. We do seem to fit together well. Maybe we could start a business together. What's more, Lance and I sure like being with you two. I started a small practice out of the house Lance and I built in Lance's home village. Perhaps we could expand the house and the practice. All of us have skills to contribute to a successful practice, and we could take on jobs that many different areas of specialty. The conversation lapsed into a period of thoughtful silence after that, and then sleep overtook them. In the morning they entered the school by the main gates without any particular notice, and made their way to Third North. They settled into Bruce and Lace's suite and finished resting up after the late night. They got up in time for lunch, and afterwards met with the registrar to find out what their courses scheduled were. Then they went up to Lance and Crystal's apartment for the afternoon. In the late afternoon a visitor came knocking at the door. Hardly to anyone's surprise, it was Mistress Merriweather, entered the sitting room after Lace opened the door. "Hello, I see all four of you are here. I'd heard that you were back." A moment passed while 5 people tried hard to sit in 2 wing chairs and a love seat. Eventually Lace, with her rather spare frame, settled on Bruce's lap in one of the wing chairs, while Lance and Crystal took the love seat and Mary the other wing chair. Mary continued, "I have some time to spare just now, and I'd really like to hear how you four have been faring." A full account of the trek ensued, with major contributions from 3 travelers, and Bruce adding only minor comments. "Bruce," Mary prompted, "thee's been rather quiet. What are thy feelings about what has transpired?" Bruce paused, his swarthy face managing to a slightly darker hue. "Mistress, I am rather taken aback by the entire circumstances. Lace and I had an affair going between us, with a very rocky start. We didn't—" Here he paused and swallowed. "I didn't want to admit that there was anything between us. When at last we had finally gotten settled into cohabiting, then the whole election thing came up. I missed Lace. Dreadfully so. I felt so low down all the time. Then in the weeks before I was to return, the village came under attack. It was evacuated, and with the other able-bodied I was pressed into the defense. I became injured through a silly error on my part. Bad judgment. Then who should come to find me but these 3? I really don't know what to make of it. This heart bond thing, that means we can't be parted from each other. Right?" Mary nodded. "That's right. What's more, now with you two have a legal right to be with each other. It's not the same as being legally married. Ask Lance and Crystal about that. But you two may not be separated against your will." "That's perfectly fine by me. I've come to realize how much I like being with Lace. But more than that, I think the 4 of us perform well together. From the time they found me, we all had skills to offer which facilitated our journey home. We we agreed that we'd like to start a joint magic practice sometime." Mary's eyes widened a little. "So, all of you are willing to be together as a group and cooperate on difficult assignments?" 4 heads nodded. "Well, that's splendid! I must say I've been very impressed with how all 4 of you have been developing your magic skills. I'm inclined to think that Crystal is largely responsible for acquiring the large amounts of energy that you've been working with, but your individual skills are used in application of that power. Crystal, if I may say so without intending to insult, your skill lies in the acquisition and use of large amounts of power, not so much in the carefully controlled use of it. You're getting better. All of you are. I would hate to see you 4 broken up just when you are beginning to work together so well. With your permission, I would like you 4 to begin an intense program of study, which I think that you are now ready to begin. It is my goal, one of my goals as headmistress, to see that students are taught at the appropriate level and speed so that their education may be facilitated to the extent possible. I do not want the individuals training to suffer simply because they were placed in the wrong group. And speaking of groups, a group like the 4 of you doesn't come along every day. Circumstances have brought you together, and the result is a whole that is indeed greater than the sum of its parts. I would like the four of you to be together as much as possible, during some classes even. Are you averse to sharing living quarters?" Four heads were shaken. "Well, I think I can persuade the housing office to locate a suitable apartment for you. I have one in mind that I think you'll be quite at home in, but I'll let you decide for yourselves. As for your studies, I hope you don't mind a lot of intensive efforts. I plan to work you all as hard as you are able and make some of you the best graduates the school has ever seen. Bad times have befallen this planet, and apathy has struck some. The college standards are not what they were, and perhaps you may help to change that. In each generation only a fixed number of those with magic skills are born, yet the enrollment of the school has been allowed to increase, and the quality of students has been lowered as a result." She stopped. "Forgive me for being so long-winded. Someone from housekeeping should be here shortly to help you get situated. Enjoy tomorrow, which is market day if you've lost track, and I will want to meet you individually on Monday." Mary departed, and shortly a whirlwind of moving activity ensued, after which they found themselves installed in a long disused but now freshened apartment located in the students' court. It had been originally designed for a resident manager, but that position had either been eliminated or combined with another, so it was vacant. In wonder they explored the two-bedroom apartment. It was located on a previously closed-off portion of the partial third floor of the students' court, adjacent to Third North. The apartment featured a full dining room, a larger kitchen, and sufficient desks that had been placed in the den for all to comfortably study at. That evening they invited Third North for a party in the apartment. Bruce was sent to town to get wine, and the pantry was raided for food to serve. It was rather livelier than the initial welcome party the last fall, and the four companions told their stories several times, then demanded that others provide tales as well. Some new faces had showed up on Third North, filling Lance and Crystal's old suite. Bruce and Lace's old suite was still empty. The party lasted well into the night, and the guests went back to their rooms. The partying mood continued with just the four, and the wine continued to flow. As on past festive occasions, they all felt really close to each other. On the morrow, market day, the four went to town, and proceeded to happily visit all the different booths. The purchases were small and inconsequential, but spirits were high. Crystal and Lance had, of course, delivered every one of the effects of the over-imbibing, and the day was thus not clouded. They had a long luncheon in one of the eateries, and then left town for an afternoon down by the river. That evening they had a quiet dinner in the apartment, and went to bed early to be ready for Mary's new curriculum on Monday. Monday morning Mary met with each of them, separately. Crystal was called first. "Crystal," Mary began, "I called you first because you are in effect the nucleus of the group. You arrived and changed Lance's life, and now you and he are bonded. Lance got in trouble, and you called on the help of Lace and Bruce. Then Bruce got in trouble, and Lace called on you and Lance. A working partnership between you has evolved, wherein each of you are trusting one another, and have learned to work well together in adversity. The four of you are learning to coexist in ways that you may not have dreamed of prior to this experience, especially you with your off-planet background. How do you feel about your companions?" "Well, Lace and I have taken some long talks, in addition to the emotional therapy she has bestowed upon me, and we've gotten pretty well acquainted as a result. Bruce is a bit more of a mystery to me, but Lace is compatible with him, else the heart bond would not have formed, or so you've said, and I have no reason to disagree. He's rather silent, unlike the rest of us, which is not a bad thing. He complements the group nicely, and he did do his share of helping us to get home once he had convalesced. Lance and I know perfectly well, and I am ever grateful for that fate linked he and I. You ran away from your parents to seek adventure and glory, did you not? This seems to be the standard story of those who strike out on their own. Your parents came back for you as you did not expect, but all seemed well at the end. Tell me, do you feel quite reconciled with your parents now? Do you feel that they would like to continue to be a controlling influence on your life, or are you well and truly free of that nest? Well, we had our differences, but now I think that we have agreed to disagree rather than continue to force our opinions on each other. They realize now that I am an adult and independent, but would still like to offer advice from time to time. Good. Will you be ready to join with the others in a special training project? I will give the details to all of you together presently, but for now, I just wish your personal feelings on the matter of continuing to work together. You may be spending some time together away from the campus, perhaps a considerable amount of time. I'd be perfectly agreeable. I'm sure the others would too. Very well. I'll see you in a few minutes after I've talked with the others. Send Lance in next, please. Lance sat down and did his best not to appear nervous. Lance, please relax. I know that you've had a checkered academic record here at the college, but I've always firmly believed that you had better in you, and now I see that I was quite right. Meeting Crystal appears to have been the best thing that could have happened to you. Since you two met, you have become less of the wild youth and more of a mature adult. Your magic skills, poor enough initially, had waned even more, perhaps under evil influence of Cindy. However, lately your skills are better than they ever were, and you are still progressing. I heard that you and Crystal have actually started a household and gained legal common law marriage status, whereas a ceremony of acknowledging the heart bond granted you no legal status except the right to not be parted. Did you form a household simply to please your parents, or did you two feel that you wanted to do it for yourselves? Well, Ma and Pa were right pleased at the notion, but partly Crystal wanted to feel like she had some legal existence on this planet. In particular, she wanted to be able to vote. For the most part, I think it was just the fact that we wouldn't have to worry about neighbors talking behind our backs about us living in sin or whatever. We wanted simply to be open and admit our relationship and be accepted. Crystal even has done a number of magic jobs for the villagers, and they seem happy to have a magus among them. I also have become somewhat better than the town quack, and folk will come to me, on the sly, mind you. Sounds reasonable. But now you probably realize that Crystal has been singled out early as a girl of special talents, and therefore there were those who viewed her as a card to be played as a game, and sought to subvert her by a variety of means. After you and Crystal bonded, you became part of that equation, so to speak, and also were singled out for special treatment as well. Finally, Lace and Bruce have effectively become part of the package as well. While the heart bonds are only between two couples, nevertheless, emotional bonds tie you all, and therefore I, at least, will not separate you, but give you every opportunity to work together. How do you feel about embarking on a special training program involving a certain amount of off-campus study? I would welcome it without reservation. We have worked so far well together, and I'm positive that we can continue to do so. Very good. I wish to ask each of you separately to assess you as individuals, for what I plan to ask you will not be easy. Will you please tell Lace that it's her turn now? Lace arrived, uplifted and cheerful. In Lance's absence, a lively conversation had sprung up in the anteroom, and she was feeling especially chipper. Hello, Lace. Good to see you again. My, you look cheerful today. I'd like to ask you a few questions alone, and then I will meet with the entire group. Of your four companions, you have been on campus the longest. You are on good terms with your seafaring parents and otherwise seem well adjusted in your young adult life. Your magic skills are probably best refined of your four companions. Crystal may wield more power, but she does not have the fine control that you do. I am pleased to see you teaching your skills to her. All of you need to learn diverse skills, and the best way is to learn it from each other. Crystal has tendency to innovate, to combine what skills she does have into new techniques. Do not be afraid to learn from her. She may stumble on some novel technique that you have not thought of before, and possibly even something that nobody ever has. Lace nodded. She does have a fresh original approach and that can-do attitude. The rest of us do tend to confine us to the lessons we learned in school. I see what you mean. Good. I want all of you to learn from each other, and to emulate that which you find good in one another. You seem to relate well to all the others in the group, and it might just be that you are helping to hold this group together, every bit as much as Crystal. I would say that you and Lance, of the four, are possibly the least inhibited. Possibly you are the least. Lance may have been at one point, but he seems to have settled down somewhat. Being uninhibited is not a fault in and of itself, as long as it's not carried to extremes, and I don't think you are. You certainly are helping the others to lighten up as needed. Now I have a question to ask of you. Soon it was Bruce's turn. He entered into Mary's inner office, and it was almost comical to see a big burly fellow looking both shy and embarrassed. "Hello, Bruce. I realize that you're not worked with me or any of the advanced instructors, but I want you to relax. I won't be asking you to do anything you're not ready for, but I will be asking you to routinely work at a limit of your capabilities. Don't be afraid to ask assistance of your three companions. Crystal can send you energy if that is holding you back from completing a task, or might be able to give a useful insight to a better way of accomplishing it. Lace is your bondmate and can help you in many ways. Don't be afraid to ask Lance's advice, since he has dealt with some of the same problems you will be facing, and from the same perspective." Mary paused. "Another thing I must mention. You're without a doubt the most retiring individual in your foursome. This is in some ways a good thing. You help keep the group down to earth in ways that Lance or Lace would not. In doing so, you balance and complement each other, in roughly a degree of necessity. However, do not be afraid to come out of your shell when needed. Now, a question for you." The question was put. Bruce paused for a moment. At last he licked his lips and spoke. "I think I agree, but more out of support for the others than out of appreciation for the opportunity." "This is as good as an acceptance as any. In time you will come to feel more strongly for what is offered you. Very well. Call the others in." The foursome quickly assembled in Mary's office. "I have talked to each of you, privately offered some individual advice, and asked you some pointed questions. Particularly, I have asked each of you if you really want to embark on this training program that I have devised. You have all answered in the affirmative, qualified perhaps, but unimportantly so. I feel that now is the time to reveal certain information to you all, information that is of a sensitive nature, and not known to many. Frankly, I am training the four of you to be operatives who will provide intelligence and possibly act against the evil forces that behest our planet." 4 draws dropped, and the room was totally silent. Thank you for joining me on today's Read with Rave episode. If you liked, please hit that like button, comment down below if you would like to hear more, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to splash the bell icon so you never miss another video, and I will catch you all on the next wave. Goodbye!